through your dissertation, your experience, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask whatever questions that come to our mind. You guys can participate as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. At that point, we will ask Faith and guests to step out, and the committee will convene and have conversation, and then we'll get into provide results. Sound good? All right.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Thank you, everyone, for attending this event. My name is Faith, and Dr. Patel has been my chair. I am so grateful to Dr. Patel for having walked me through this stage of my EDD program, and I am grateful for his wise suggestions throughout the throughout my writing process. I would like to thank my community. I would like to thank Dr. Wilson for accepting me in the EDD program. I would like to thank Dr. Robertson. I remember working with and I did work with you during my internship, and it was a great experience. And thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Julia, for making it. Thank you, Tanya, for making it. The title of my study is a phenomenological study of K through 12 educators' perceptions of social emotional learning for K through 12 students in Southern Illinois. The objective of this study was to analyze K through 12 educators' perceptions, opinions, and experiences of the implementation of social emotional learning in a small school district somewhere in Southern Illinois. The results revealed 4 consistent aspects. One of them was educator competence, efficacy, need, and perception. I'll be going into details with those when I get to the findings. I will be using some vocabulary words today like CASO. CASO is collaborative academic, social, and emotional learning, and I'll say CASO most of the time. Implementation, that's the process of making something active or effective. An initiative is a program an organization adopts as an intervention to solve apparent issues. And SEL is social emotional learning. I'll also be talking about the 5 competencies of social emotional learning. Phenomenology is a quantitative research method that explores people's lived experiences, opinions, and perceptions of a phenomenon. In this case, it's social emotional learning. I'll also talk about horizontalization. It's a phenomenological data analysis that I use, in which researchers treat all participants' responses with equal value. Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, CASO. This is an organization that is the leading voice in studying, defining, and promoting SEL. CASO facilitates instruction and pedagogy, and they have different programs that schools and organizations can choose from to implement SEL in their schools. According to CASO, SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So CASO has the 5 competencies of CASO. The first one is self-management. For children to be successful in school and in the world, they have to be good self-managers. They have to be aware of their apparent mood, of their feelings. And if they are aware of those, then they can develop the ability of self-awareness. Self-management. Self-management is when they make good decisions in what to do about their apparent feelings. And self-awareness is being aware of how they're feeling. And then social awareness is having the ability to make good choices because their choices will affect others, or how their actions will make others feel. And the 4th one is relationship skills. They should be able to create meaningful relationships and maintain those relationships. And lastly, responsible decision making. They should be able to make decisions knowing that those decisions they make will affect them uh, in the present and in the future, and all of those people around them. When kids develop, master these skills, they have empathy for others, they make good decisions, they make good commitments, like commit to their education, and they are motivated and they have self-esteem. So why is this important? Why should kids have developed those competencies? It's for life and for well-being, for good relationships, for planning in school, for academic achievement and social skills. Um, Research shows that students with training in social emotional learning gain an average of 11 percentile points on standardized test scores compared with students who did not have those skills. So the problem for this study is that the, there are changing demographics amongst children in American schools. And because of those, kids don't have appropriate behavior at school. We see suspensions and all of that. And what intervention can we use to help these kids become successful? So we can use SEL, but teachers are not adequately informed of these SEL standards in the state of Illinois. So the purpose of this study is to analyze the influence of social emotional learning on a K-12 school district in Illinois. It was also to assess teacher competency with the existing Illinois social emotional learning standards. In this study, I assessed the teacher's capacity or their ability to implement SEL correctly. So this is a client-based research study. In this school district I'm talking about, they had started to implement social emotional learning through an initiative called the Buddy System. The Buddy System, it consisted of adults, every adult in the building, taking care of at least 5 to 6 children. If these kids did not come to school, if there was a problem at home, this adult was responsible for those kids. So I decided to embark on this study to pursue this community issue in which the findings could positively address their concerns, and I wanted to share my findings with them, and maybe the findings could inform their future decisions regarding students' well-being. So there was one research question that informed this study, and the research question is, what relationship does the school district have with SEL? So I used the literature to help me broaden my understanding of what the research out there says about my topic, which is social emotional learning. Now, we see things like diversity, social economic status, and immigration. These have created a lot of diversity in American schools, and because of that, SEL has become trendy. So attention has been given to public education since the 1980s, which resulted in several academic policies over the last 30 years. In 1983, the United States was declared a nation at risk. Because of that declaration, the educational stakeholders all demanded for some kind of reform in education. So what the federal government did 20 years later to correct or to address those concerns from the nation at risk, they passed an act called the No Child Left Behind in 2001. So what they wanted is to assess or to analyze the impact of this act after 12 years. But after 12 years, the assessment showed that the impact was not positive. So what they did to correct those gaps in the No Child Left Behind, they came up with the Common Core. So as you can see, the Common Core state standards also, they are standards, and they they want the schools to be accountable for reaching these standards. And what they use are test scores. That's the measurement that they use. So standards are based on perceived need to have high standards for students and teachers in schools. And then to show accountability, their test scores have to be high. And then there are sanctions for schools that do not reach this level. And so sometimes it's in terms of funding, they will lower their funding or not have funding, and then those who get better scores, their funding is higher. So the fourth one is choice. The parents have the choice to pull their children from those schools that do not meet the standards. So now, social and demographic shifts such as immigration, divorce, remarriages, all of that has made it very difficult for teachers to teach these kids successfully using the Common Core. Right now, most educators think that it is too early to assess whether the Common Core is good or not for education. So because of accountability, standards and standardized testing, teachers are finding it hard to address students' social and emotional learning because standards only account only want they are only aimed to academic achievement only. So SEL was introduced for the first time in 1994 at the FETSA Institute. The objective of this conference was to illustrate a structure for supporting and implementing social emotional competencies across the education curriculum. As reviewed by CASO, SEL programs are different from, like, let's say, standards like the Common Core because they address the way they are set up, their interventions for racially, ethnically, and geographically diverse children in their student outcomes. So if schools fail to address students' social and emotional needs, the achievement gap will widen. The achievement gap is the variation in academic achievement between middle class rich white children and students living in poverty. And mostly these are minority kids. So because the student population is becoming very diverse, that means their needs are also very diverse. That means that teachers need extra skills, additional skills to help address these needs. So the literature showed that the most important part of getting those positive um, impacts from SEL is through proper implementation. The people that are implementing the program have to do it correctly. Their perceptions of the program have to be positive. If teachers think that SEL will not be effective or it will not improve student outcomes, then they will do it with a negative attitude and that affects implementation. So the most important goal of any school that chooses to promote SEL must be proper SEL practices. So there are numerous models that describe the implementation process, but I found one called the Quality of Implementation Framework, the QIF. This consists of 25 models, and all of them throughout the literature consistently assess that implementation is extremely complicated process and that it is influenced by perceptions, attitudes, skills, and abilities of everybody that is involved. So if the administrators choose a program that they don't like and teachers don't like, even if the kids like the program, it will not be effective because everyone involved has to be on the same board. So there were some gaps that I found in the literature. The literature shows that educator characteristics impact perception, use, and promotion of SEL in schools, but the relevancy and efficacy of this literature is limited because it mainly assesses educator characteristics such as perception and attitudes, but it does not represent these needs within more extensive and comprehensive structure that defines the fundamentals of capacity. I also found another gap that there is limited understanding of educator capacity at the high school level. Most of the studies that have been conducted have been at mainly at the elementary school level. I found that there were 214 studies that were conducted on SEL programs, and 56% of those were conducted in elementary schools. 31% were in middle school, and only 13 was at the high school level. So it was found that most high school teachers have a negative perception of SEL. Have negative perceptions of SEL, but elementary teachers are more susceptible. So the theoretical framework I used was implementation science. Implementation science is translating research to practice by evaluating components that needed for organizational change. This was appropriate for my study because the purpose of the study was to analyze the perceptions of the perceptions of educators regarding SEL. The research design. This study followed a qualitative research design focusing on phenomenological approach to collect information from participants in a comprehensive one-on-one interview via Zoom. I chose a qualitative approach because qualitative research is appropriate when wanting to understand or obtain an account of an event or an experience. Phenomenology was appropriate also for purposes of obtaining a description of a range of opinions regarding social emotional learning. The setting of the study was in an inner city small school. It's in southern Illinois. It serves predominantly minority kids that fall under the poverty category. This setting was appropriate because they were already implementing SEL using the buddy system that I mentioned earlier. They have about 24 certified teachers and 19 paraprofessionals. So SEL had gained an important role at this school. So the purpose of this study was to analyze whether or not SEL positively impacted outcomes. So the target site was very small, therefore my participant group was also very small. I used purposive sampling methodology. I wrote an email to the superintendent and asked for a diverse group of educators to participate in my study, and some of them said yes, some of them said no. Dr. Patel knows what I went through with this, because whenever the COVID came, some of my participants actually decided to not participate because school was closed and we were not really structured. So I ended up with only 4 participants instead of the 8 that I had originally. So the rationale for each participant was that they had participated in teaching SEL. The research methods: conducted one-on-one interview via Zoom. I used the closed caption functionality to help with the initial transcription of data. Research questions informed the interview protocol, and probing questions helped me gain a more detailed discussion from my participants. Data analysis. I analyzed the data through a process called horizontalization. It's a phenomenological data analysis method that requires the researcher to treat all participants' responses with equal value. With the statements from all interviews and discussions, they were all treated with the same importance. Important themes were assimilated into comprehensive description of the participants' experiences with SEL. Data collection. Interviews were conducted, like I mentioned earlier, using one-on-one qualitative interview protocol with guiding questions. Interview questions were created to provide guidance in discussing the phenomenon, which is SEL, and to answer the research question. The questions were higher order thinking because I did not want the participants to come up with a desired response. They lasted 30 to 40 minutes, because that gave us enough time for me to listen to their experiences with SEL and their perceptions. I actively listened to the participants' interviews for better understanding of their experiences. Data management. For confidentiality purposes, all data was saved on a password protected Google Drive. In organizing data, all data was coded and grouped into categories. The different categories of data was linked to develop a logical explanation for social emotional learning implementation, and I linked it to the literature. Data analysis was done concurrently with data collection. Both verbal and non-verbal interview data was carefully made use of, and a copy of the transcribed data was sent back to the participants for them to tell me that yes, to agree that yes, this is what I said, no, this is not what I meant, especially with the non-verbal data, because I could have misunderstood somebody. After categorizing the data into groups, Axel coding was utilized for data analysis. I read and thought deeply about the interview transcripts. I read my personal notes that I made during the interview, and I used Axel coding to categorize the data. I analyzed narrative structure and contextual relationships. I created matrices and displayed the data to provide answers to the research question and analyze any validity threats. Procedures for trustworthiness, data collected was shared with the participants for transparency purposes. To break down preconceived notions of research bias, I explained to them the research process, and I explained the stages of data analysis and how findings would be identified. I think that using recording the Zoom interviews with captions helped to establish trustworthiness because participants were able to review the transcripts and confirm their responses. I had 4 participants. For confidentiality purposes, I did not use their real names. I used T1 through T4. T stands for teacher. I had 3 females, 2 white females, T1 was 28 years old. She's white, she teaches math, she's single, she had a bachelor's degree, and yes, she had implemented SEL, and she had worked for the district for years. T2 was 52-year-old male. He was a math teacher, married, and he had a master's degree. He had implemented SEL also and had worked for the district 6 years. 48-year-old T3 was 48 years old. She taught elementary reading. She's married. She has a master's degree. She also implemented SEL and had worked for the district for 3 years. And then T4 was African American, female, 50 years old. She's married. She has a master's degree in education, and she had also implemented SEL and had worked for the district for 7 years. So,
Faith, can I ask, I'm sorry, my pen's run out of ink. Does anybody have an extra pen? I'm sorry.
I've got one.
That's what I get for using this, whatever.
Pass it down, please.
Thank you very much, sorry.
okay, so I was gonna say that the purpose of the study was to analyze these people's perceptions, lived experiences, perceptions of implementing SEL in the school district. So research findings. So I asked them different questions, and the first one was their perceptions regarding the benefits of SEL in their school. They all said that SEL is beneficial for improving school climate. Some others said that teachers can also benefit from SEL for self-care. And another one said that SEL can improve students' overall success. This person, at the time of the interview, he was a principal actually at the elementary school, but before that, he had implemented SEL as a math teacher. He was a math teacher before, so I did not interview him as an administrator. He was interviewed as a teacher. But he said that he intends to invite community stakeholders to be coming in and have positive interactions with the kids. He thought that was essential. And they said that SEL changes, so there were some noticeable changes they had seen in the kids, like the kids were aware that if I have a problem, I go look for my buddy. And they thought that was like a self-awareness skill that they had mastered. And they did say that it was too early for them to conclude and say SEL, positively impacted student academic achievement or school environment. or attendance or behavior because they had not implemented it long enough. When asked about their perceptions regarding the need of SEL in their school, they all agreed that SEL is necessary for addressing students' social and emotional needs. They all expressed that there is no time for SEL in addition to common core state standards, state testing, and other things that they are expected to do, that they needed time allocated specifically for SEL. They believe that SEL has become a basic need for students and teachers, especially because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We talked a lot about that. They said that the kids they would see more depression among kids, and suicide not only in their school, but they were reading news all over the place. So, and then one of them was concerned about teacher buy-in because the success of SEL depends on if teachers believe in it or not. When asked about perceptions of ability, their own ability regarding SEL, most of them said they lack the necessary needs. I mean, the necessary skills needed to effectively implement SEL because they had not received enough ongoing SEL training. They admitted to having attended one SEL training that was provided by the school. When asked about if they feel that there's a culture of support from their administrators regarding SEL, they say they did not feel supported regarding SEL instruction because there were no real hands-on training regarding SEL for them. They did not have the time in the school day allocated to SEL. They said they would feel supported if the district set time apart for SEL instruction. They suggested that if they got homeroom time, they could use homeroom for SEL instruction. They hoped for additional training regarding SEL. They said there's too much focus on standards and test scores, so they are expected to raise those test scores, and they feel like they can't teach SEL in addition to that. They did tell me that there is a lengthy SEL training that the school district was preparing because they had an SEL grant. There are other schools in the area also that have the same grant. When asked about their familiarity with Illinois SEL standards, they said they are not real familiar with them. Some of them had heard of them. One of them even said that they talked about those standards during that SEL training they had. They had sent them a digital copy of those standards, but there's no accountability when it comes to SEL, like the common core standards, so they never took time to look at it. When asked about why they decided to engage in SEL implementation, they said they never had a choice. They said the buddy program was introduced by their administration and they had to participate. The problem was that they were never given specific instructions on specific activities to do with the kids. They were just told, this is your buddy, so what is your buddy, help them. And they even had a day in the week where they would meet all the kids for 30 minutes, but they really didn't do anything with the kids. So what they wanted, when asked for what they want to see in the future regarding SEL, they said they would like for their school to adopt an SEL program that is specifically designed to address the unique needs of their students. They wanted more appropriate, consistent, ongoing SEL training. They wanted more teacher buy-in, and they wanted the school to approve a set time regarding SEL instruction. When asked about the impact of students' outcome like academic performance, they said there was no data because there was no attendance data, discipline, academic, or school climate data because schools had closed. When schools closed, they weren't really teaching. And then when they started teaching again, it was all online. In the year 2020 and 2021, there was no state testing. So they didn't even have that type of data to look at. They didn't have attendance data because kids were not at school. So there was no data to look at. And SEL was not implemented long enough because they had just started and then schools closed. So The purpose of this study was to analyze the lived experiences and perceptions and opinions of these K through 12 educators regarding SEL. So when at the end of it all, there were 4 consistent codes that came up. One of them was efficacy, perception, need, and competence. And I'll be talking about those here in a second. When it came to educator competence, the codes that came up were feeling incompetent. So the teachers felt incompetent because they had not received appropriate training regarding SEL. But they were willing to engage in SEL implementation. They just felt like they did, at that moment, they did not have the proper skills that they needed. When it came to efficacy, the following codes emerged: school closure, virtual instruction, inconsistencies, and disruptions. So they did not get the desired intended impact from SEL because of when the pandemic came, schools closed, so they were not able to implement SEL like they had planned. And then when it came to perception, under the category of perception, these codes came up: school climate, positive behavior, attendance, and student academic outcomes. They stated that there was no data to prove the impact of SEL on those aspects because of school closures. And then there was need. Under need, the codes that came up were common core alignment, planning, and standardized testing. SEL wasn't prioritized because of time. There was no separate time for SEL. The teachers who taught math felt like they had to prioritize common core because they had to have good scores, and they say they didn't have enough time to plan for their core instruction, so they couldn't add SEL to it. They needed administrator support for effective implementation. Okay, so the participants needed most support regarding SEL. They needed time set aside. And as you can see, as we talked about the standards earlier, this education frame emphasized today only focuses on standards and testing. So it has failed to recognize the changing student demographics and needs. So kids in poverty are prone to adverse childhood experiences, as in this case, or as in the case of this school district I mentioned earlier, the kids are all minority and fall under the poverty group. So we think that SEL can be used to address most of their needs because poverty takes away like basic needs from children. So under these 4 things, competency, efficacy, and capacity, the literature stated that teachers' practices must change and that teachers need a different set of skills for successful implementation. The responses from the participants matched the literature. Participants described their inability to effectively implement SEL due to lack of training. So the participants' perceptions, opinions, and lived experiences regarding SEL were similar to CASEL's framework. Remember the 5 competencies that I talked about earlier. CASEL works to integrate SEL for preschool to high school students. Also is the leading voice in studying, defining, and promoting SEL. So the 5 SEL competencies, according to CASEL, can be seamlessly integrated into core instruction. When students master the 5 competencies, there can be an improvement in behavior, in academic outcomes, student to adult positive relationships, and overall positive school climate. Implications for educator competency, efficacy, need, and perceptions. To improve competence, more training regarding SEL is required for teachers. They want the training so that they can be competent regarding SEL instruction. For the educator's perception of SEL as an intervention can be used to address students' social and emotional well-being. Administration is willing to use grant money that we talked about earlier to address that intervention. And an appropriate SEL program can positively impact students. So CASO has lots of them. The school just has to look at specific data and figure out what their student group needs, because every school is different. Under efficacy, SEL was not properly implemented because of lack of support, training, and school closures, and lack of time. So admin needs to allocate time for SEL. P20 implications. Diversity. Lots of diversity differences between teachers, student, and student population. America's schools are increasingly diverse. Teachers are white and female. Schools must address this diversity. And maybe P20 needs to create a curriculum that celebrates otherness, create opportunities for multicultural research, and maybe study abroad programs so that students in teacher preparation programs can get exposed to other cultures. And then leadership, participants are leaders. These teachers are leaders in their own classrooms and outside of the classrooms, depending if they are coaches or whatever they do outside of the classroom. So P20 needs to mold future educators who have strong leadership skills. And maybe with those strong leadership skills, they'll be able to implement SEL correctly. When it came to innovation, two participants are on the school improvement committee, so they can be agents of change. They can be agents of innovation. So P20 education needs to include SEL, maybe as a core, an elective subject, so educational leadership programs need to include SEL, so that schools have people that can correctly implement social emotional learning. The last one was implementation. Participants did not feel confident to implement SEL, so maybe P20 needs to create continuing education opportunities for in-service teachers regarding SEL, and maybe SEL should be made mandatory for individuals under teacher preparation. So the limitations I found: the study was conducted in a small school district and only 4 participants for data collection. That was too small of a representation to represent the entire state of Illinois, or even just southern Illinois. The findings might be limited to SEL was not implemented and was discontinued. School closure presented a data collection limitation because there was no attendance, no discipline data because the kids were not at school. And then the demographic makeup of the participants wasn't very diverse, because 3 of the participants were female, there was 1 male, and then the rest of them were white, but 1 African American. And then this was a qualitative study, so it's not statistically representative. So results are based on a small sample size. The recommendations, maybe next time to conduct a quantitative study to analyze SEL impact in southern Illinois schools, the ones that acquired the SEL grant, and maybe for more accurate findings, research maybe an appropriate SEL program that matches student population needs, and then conduct a study to see the impact. Maybe next time involve students in the study, because I think it's important for to get an account, to analyze the students' perceptions of how SEL has affected them. And then involve other stakeholders like school counselors, social workers, special education teachers, even community members in the study. And lastly, so SEL is trending throughout America. And maybe it can be a larger study where somebody will analyze the impact of SEL on K-12 students all over the country. That was all, and this is all the picture I used.
All right, so bringing it back to the committee and guests and virtual today, maybe virtually. Uh, questions for today? Go ahead, Tom.
Are you forgetting me?
Yeah, go
Oh.
ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for your study. As I mentioned when we met earlier, this is kind of goes hand in hand with what is considered a student personnel point of view in terms of focusing on the development of the whole student, not just looking at the academic achievement, but the other aspects of a total education for individuals. So I thought that was a lot of relationship to what my field of student affairs is all about, and a lot of similarities. So that's just an observation, not a question. There's a lot of themes that come through here in terms of the four participants about they saw value, but they didn't feel like they had the necessary training or there was enough time to implement it. And I know teachers are very, very busy, and there is this focus on standards. If you don't reach certain standards, that impacts funding. And we feel that in higher education also. And that's the whole thing behind that we struggle with on this concept of performance funding. Not focus so much on that, you sometimes lose what the overall focus should be and what we're trying to accomplish with our students. But good thing was they saw value, which they had more time and more training implementation of it. So I thought that was good. I don't know, and I thought the suggestions of well, the buddy system was kind of interesting, but they were just kind of thrown into it.
Yes, they did, especially the people who are not teachers, like paraprofessionals, they didn't know what to do. So they just sat in a room with a group of kids and waited for the
Yeah, they just assumed you'd know what to do, and that 30 minutes probably seemed like hours if you didn't know how to proceed with the students there. So that was interesting. So, how do you change the attitude? They didn't feel like initially all the administrators were on board with the program. Of course, you certainly had to face pandemic, school closures, so you had a lot of obstacles coming to you. I thought it was a very interesting study, and I think you came up, even with that small sample, you came up with conclusions and recommendations. It was clear they saw value, just that they wish they had more training, and that it would have a positive impact on students' total education.
Thank you, sir.
That's my initial thoughts, but I'll let someone else go and I'll come back.
I appreciate your study, Faith. I appreciate you sticking with it. Arguably, you're one of the experts on this now. Put a lot of effort into studying this. One thing that our provost is fond of saying is a dissertation's about what, so what, now what. So you're to the now what now, and you made some recommendations, but based on your knowledge of this, and to Dr. Robinson's point, he pointed out that you pointed out the teachers found value in it. They didn't feel supported. For whatever reason. Now that you're through this, let's talk about the now what. What can you do as arguably one of the leading thought people on this to affect change in the use and implementation of the support of, perhaps rather, in the implementation of SEL?
Well, the first thing I would do is to work with the administrators of the school, look at data, look at the behavior data, what are the behavior trends, what are the problems that kids, get into mostly, how is their attendance, what does the attendance look like? Why does it look like this? What is home life like? Are there factors affecting their attendance? And then maybe also look at their test scores, since they are also important. Look at their academic performance, their achievement. Where is it low? What does it need? Now, after gathering all of that data, then we can look at Castle's framework and look at their available programs and choose one that actually matches the needs of the kids. And then have everybody on board, talk about SEL with everybody, go through a training with the teachers first so that they know what the program is requiring them to do. And maybe after they feel confident that they can teach SEL, then the school needs to allocate time. Okay, maybe we'll do SEL 1 day a week during this time, maybe after school. If they have some programs that you can do after school, it depends. So then I guess we will go from there.
Well, they even talked about homeroom maybe in that time period. But I guess following up on your question, why do you think the administrators in this small sample were not supportive? Same factors of just they didn't have the time, they didn't have a clear understanding, they're trying to do too many things, and so it became kind of a backbone.
Yeah, SEL is new to the administrators too. And I think they really don't know what it takes because they are also fixated on the standards.
Yeah.
So they are very supportive when it comes to the standards. But when it comes to SEL, I guess they haven't really figured that SEL is becoming a very basic need for students.
And I would guess the administrators, because standards impact funding, so they're going to be focusing on
Yes.
the standards, and then if they have time, they look at other aspects. It's not realizing that SEL maybe is going to impact positive those standards.
Because they do have rewards for kids, like right before testing, before mock testing, they'll say, okay, if you show a growth, maybe 10% our growth, we are going to give you this. But I think that with SEL will take care of that because as students get to, as they get to let's say their behavior changes and there are no classroom disruptions anymore and they have good relationships with others and with their teachers, they're going to care more about their education and then the test scores will fall in place.
You know, which impacts on the total environment as you indicated for everyone.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember this about me or not, but I'm a cynical old man. And all those things you mentioned, I think certainly have potential, but due to my cynicism, I would say they've had all that stuff available to them forever, but have chosen to not do anything with it. So perhaps it's an advocacy issue. Maybe there's just not a strong enough advocate for SEL with the right individuals, because they got the data, they can look at the data, they can set aside, they can do the buddy system, they can set up homeroom time, they can do whatever, but it's not part of the standards. And again, to Dr. Robertson's point, if it's not part of the standards, it's not part of the conversation. So I think in the absence, it's like anything else, in the absence of advocacy, and the absence of advocacy to whomever the gatekeeper is, then the best thing in the world a lot of times never happens. So I would hope. Now, here's the not cynical way. I would hope that you moving forward would take this knowledge and you would become the advocate. If not the advocate, at least the squeaky wheel. Because a lot of times, squeaky wheel gets a lot more attention than advocacy does. And not be deterred by all those realities. But take on the challenge of advocating. Obviously, things important, you would have done the study. Or I hope you did the study because you know support. So, now that you're on this end of it, what would you do different other than get 8 to 10 people from various and sundry? Here's a good thing about a qualitative study. You don't have to have a bunch of people. Dr. Patel's probably told you that several times. So you're not looking for generalizability. In some cases, you're not even looking for transferability. Because, to your point, it's limited. But that aside, on this end of it, what would you do different?
In writing the study,
I'm open to whatever you got to say about it.
I don't know. I'm thinking. I think when it comes to SEL, if it's ever going to be taken seriously, it has to come from feds. Because if the feds say standards are here and this is what we want, the schools will do that. So if the feds will say SEL is important, now every school is expected to teach SEL, here are the standards for SEL. I think then it will be taken seriously.
And do you remember how the Fed makes that doable?
I don't think. Yeah.
Money.
Yeah.
They put money behind it.
Everything.
So,
Yeah.
so I was gonna follow up with a simple question that speaks to that in terms of how do you make SEL have teeth? I mean, in your study, you were indicating that the buddy system was integrated into the school because they achieved an SEL grant, but it was a
No,
top
that was
down.
before. That
Oh,
was
before.
Yes. Now they just got the SEL grant recently.
Okay, all right.
It's
So,
I think it's a 5-year grant.
all right, but it's still top down, right? So it's being
They have
from
not
the
even
top.
started.
Okay, but eventually what they do will be top down, right? So how do you get the folks who are actually implementing, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, implementing, that are going to be the ones implementing the system that's been acquired via the grant by the administrators, say now you gotta do this. How do you get the people who are on the ground floor actually implementing the system to buy into?
Maybe expose them to maybe look for schools that have implemented SEL and visit them, talk to them, and find out how they have benefited from it. And maybe after getting that information from other schools that it has worked for, maybe then they will believe in it. Because the truth is, some teachers also believe in the standards. They believe in the standards and they think that SEL, you're just patting kids on the back, and these kids are bad and have to punish them, and that SEL staff is just telling them that there's no accountability for your behavior.
So you're almost gonna have to really help see the correlation between SEL standards and, because they were saying they don't have enough time to do both.
Yes.
So I have to determine how to help them see that if you do this, it's gonna help over here.
How do you think COVID affected your results? Aside from what you talked about too, like, so if you went back today to do the study now, given the same group of 4, given the same questions, do you think they're, or even pre-COVID, do you think what they would have said to you would be different in terms of their, of course, the COVID and school shutting down, all that stuff would not necessarily come up in the conversation, but just in terms of their understanding of SEL, their the support that they garnered to implement SEL, do you think they'd be the same?
I think it would be the same. Well, the administrator said that the training, that they would have provided more trainings, but schools closed. So
Okay.
maybe they would have gotten more training if schools hadn't closed,
Yeah.
because their perceptions were still positive.
Mhm.
So, and according to the literature, that is almost the most important aspect. So,
Okay.
I think it would still be the same.
Dave, you know, I'm also a middle school teacher, so I found your.
Actually, these days I teach high school.
Oh, you're at high school now?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Those middle school kids anymore.
But I just want to say, you know, as another educator, that I found this very interesting, and it goes straight to Maslow's rules of
Hierarchy of needs.
hierarchy of needs, and if we don't meet these kids' basic needs, we can't teach them. It's just the long and short of it. And I'm thinking that more of the educator training needs to hear this, because I've never heard of it myself. I've never heard of this. And I looked at 1994, you'd think I would have heard of it, you know. So then the other thing is, I was thinking of the schools that I know of. They have this program called PBIS, Positive Behavior
Yes, I thought-
Intervention Systems.
But I thought-
I'm wondering if you could implement those together. If you could get the people who are already doing positive behavior intervention systems to take and then hook this onto that, that might be a way to implement it more easily.
And I think I need to start documenting some of the things I do in my classroom. So I was teaching English, middle school English, and then because I'm more interested in SEL, I found another job that gave me more opportunities to do more SEL stuff. So I'm the credit recovery teacher at McCracken County High School. So the kids, the groups of kids that I get, no teacher wants to be anywhere near those kids because according to them, those are bad kids. Those kids, you know, they are academically reluctant. They don't want to come to school. They don't want to study. They are disrespectful and everything. But in my classroom, these kids are great kids. And now the administrators are like, what are you doing with those kids? How come they are so good? These are the problem children. Even their write-ups, like to in-school detention, have gone down, and these kids are coming to school more, and they're actually completing their work, and they're getting their credits in. Now, my administrators are telling me I need to teach English. So I said, no, if that you're doing so great with these kids, I think you'll even do better if you're teaching them English. And I'm like, but that's what I'm trying to run away from. I will not be as effective teaching English as I am now because now I don't have to worry about the standards. I'm just worrying about their SEL needs. And maybe if you let me do this, it will help you with the English and math teachers. When they come from my room and come to you, they'll be ready to learn.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good concept, ready to learn. Readiness is very important. But if they're dealing with other issues, they're not gonna be ready to learn anything. So,
Keep track of that data. Yes.
I'll start documenting. In fact, one of my administrators asked me to start documenting the things I'm doing
Yeah.
because they wanted me to go share them with the new teachers who were struggling with the kids. And I started documenting, but it's not so serious.
Document and keep track of the data to see how, whether it's referrals, the frequency of referrals, and test scores, and classroom behavioral issues, and what are all those things, all those factors that result in obtaining quality education. Keep track of all that stuff to see if it's effective. We're doing the work already, so we might as well capitalize on it.
well, they indicated that with their frustration with the buddy system, one of them, they didn't get any feedback.
No, and they did not really have, they did not get any kind of instruction to go with it.
All right, we're at 1:30 now, so I think at this point, unless there's further questions, all right, I'm going to ask you and guests to head on out. And is that being recorded?
I can shut it.
Yep.